All right, massive news of John Herdman leaving the Canadian men's national team, going where? Where, James Sharman? Toronto FC. So I ask you this before I get your reaction. What's the lead story? Is it John Herdman leaving Canada or John Herdman joining TFC?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the big story here is John Herman leaving Canada after 12 odd years from the women's program to the men's program, jumping ship during this tumultuous period prior to a home nation World Cup. Don't forget, there's a lot of reasons why people would want that job, but just to show how bad the situation is, I think John Herman leaving this program when he is just an enormous story, an indictment on the current realities, probably in Canadian soccer, albeit for a really, really good job with a lot of potential.
Mhm. But he's leaving one place. I mean, like most of us, right? You're at a company for a long time. You don't like the way that things are going, the direction of the company. You're not happy with the finances and the financial situation, and now you're leaving to join another club. Obviously, club football is different than coaching a national team. Probably taking a bit of a pay cut, but this says a lot about what's going on behind the scenes with Canada soccer. The fact that, you know what, we're 2 years, 9 months, and 13 days out from a home World Cup, and your manager decides to leave because of how bad things are behind the scenes. It's such a horrible look for Canada. But let's be honest, heading into this home World Cup, it's probably still a pretty attractive job, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. In some regards, listen, the fact that there's no games in the next window and they can't afford to play matches is not great, right? That's a check in the negative column. But you're taking over a team with some real great talent. We know that. A team that qualified for a World Cup. The money's decent by international standards. Who knows?
Mhm.
Um, but Canada's a nice place to live, I suppose. There's a lot of reasons why you might want this job, but at the same time, I think it will also scare off a lot of people, given the lack of resources. You're not going to get a big name, right? Simple as that. And maybe they shouldn't be going for a big name. There's names out there right now who I think could be good fits for the national program, who might demand less than John Herdman, not just from a salary standpoint, but also from the resources they'll use within that team. So I think there'll be names, obviously, already, I'm sure, lining up for this job. There's some definite positives, but let's not kid ourselves. The game off the pitch in Canada right now is an absolute joke. It's an embarrassment. There needs to be a big fix there, and whoever takes over this men's job has got a huge job on their hands.
Okay, let's talk about the job at Toronto FC. So Herdman doesn't officially take over until October 1st. He's going to help with the transition from the national team until he leaves to join Toronto FC. So how does he fit now with Toronto FC? Is it a match made in heaven between these two?
Yeah, possibly. Listen, I mean, it's going to be a really popular hire with the fan base. And let's be honest here, from a PR standpoint, this club needs to make some good moves. It's been a nightmarish campaign. I think he'll go there. He'll be given a lot of power. This won't just be a guy going in as head coach. He'll go there with a lot of power to really reshape this entire club from the ground up. Now, what that means for the current GM, Jason Hernandez, I don't know. But John Herdman won't just take a coaching job, right? He's got a vision for this club, and it's a club with big resources. Obviously, currently those resources are going towards a couple of very highly paid Italian stars who are not performing to their salaries or even close. So once he decides what to do with them, or once they decide what they want to do with them, I think he's going to have pretty much a clean slate. This off season could be scorched earth time. I think at TFC.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much already at that point, considering the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Pretty much no chance of making MLS Cup playoffs. I know, like mathematically, they're still in it. It's one of those, but
10
there's
straight
just no way
losses
it's
are
happening.
probably not happening at
Unless
this point.
Messi decides, hey, I'm leaving Inter Miami to come to TFC and
Right.
join John
But
Herdman.
I wonder though, Albert, let me ask you this. So
Yeah.
obviously Lorenzo Insigne is there. We know the situation with him and Federico Bernardeschi. But these are highly skilled players, right? Do you think John Herdman would sit them down and say, okay, can you be part of the solution here? Because they play a certain style of football. He likes attacking football. He could definitely use them if they're motivated. I don't know if they are. I mean, all the people I speak to would suggest that no, they're not motivated and that they need to get out of this club. But if you're John Herdman right now, I think you have to at least sit down with them and say, can you be part of the solution here? Because I can find a way to make it work with you.
Yeah, how can you not, right? I mean, John will definitely, I would think, talk to them at least to see, hey, can we make this thing work? Because we've seen what, individually what they can do. Bernadeschi can, easily become one of the top goal scorers in MLS, as can Lorenzo Insigne. And if Herdman, someone who tends to bring rooms together and bring people together, I mentioned, is this a match made in heaven? Maybe for those guys and to gel and bring a team together, maybe Herdman is that missing link. But there's no question that this is an incredibly difficult job for John
Yeah,
Herdman. But
my,
I mean, without the stresses of, are we going to have matches to play? Do we have enough
mhm,
money? Do I have to
yeah,
go door to door and talk to people? He doesn't have to think about these things anymore. And I also think we need to realize that this also is John Herdman's vision in his future. He wants to coach at the club level. He said that
yeah.
before. So from that standpoint, it's not surprising. And I think when he sees two guys like Insigne and Bernadeschi in that roster, in that squad, he probably thinks, well, if I bring these two together, maybe this rebuild can be quicker than they're hoping.
And don't forget, when he took over the men's team for Canada, there were big divisions and cliques in that room as well. And he got them
Right.
together. Now, listen, there may be divisions and cliques there again now, but when it mattered, he got them together and they qualified for a World Cup. He is good at that. He's good at motivating players. He's good with young players as well. So, yeah, I think he'll walk into the training ground at TFC with all the resources he could possibly want. And this is a coach, a very modern coach, right? Who his staff for Canada is massive, right? That's why he raises money himself, the private sector to pay for a lot of his staff and the national team. He wants a big staff. He needs a big staff. It'll be a very progressive, modern football club with John Herdman in charge. That is for sure. The playing staff, though, is comes down to it, the most important part of it, right? And we'll see what that looks like for next season. Um, I think it's a great hire. I do wonder if Insigne and Bernadeschi will look at John Herdman and be impressed. They wouldn't impress with Bob Bradley,
No.
right? Who's qualified? He's done a lot more club football than John Herdman has, right? This is John Herdman's first foray into club football, and I think it'll be a success if given the chance. But I really wonder. I would love to be a fly in the wall in those conversations and those
It's
meetings, and just what is said to whom.
Yeah. Listen, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but going back to Canada, I just find it so I understand why he left and why he'd want to leave. We've talked about this for so long, but it is really shocking considering it's a home World Cup and it may never happen again. And it's likely that Canada is going to play in a Copa America. So
Yeah.
you're sacrificing these opportunities as a manager of the national team because of what's going on behind the scenes. At least that's what we think. Unless the offer from Toronto FC really blew him out of the water in terms
Oh,
of
I'm sure it
maybe
did.
how
I'm
much he's
sure
going
he's
to
getting a
make.
lot more money. I'm sure he's
You
getting a
think
lot more
so?
money.
You think so?
100%. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. More money for sure. Um, but you're right. Copa America's one real big prize, right? Isn't it? On the horizon there, and then a
Yeah.
home World Cup. Of course it is. It just shows, I think, just how bad it is at Canada soccer right now financially, and how they just cannot afford really to field all these teams, all these programs, and the money must come from somewhere. So that's a real shame. They'll figure it out eventually. But if you're John Herdman, he probably thinks to himself, "Man, the room at the World Cup wasn't great. It wasn't a great World Cup. There are problems on that side. Have I taken this team as far as I can take them? It could be that as well."
Right.
And if you combine that with a manager who's very ambitious and wants to get into club football at some point, it's the one of the biggest clubs in MLS, is Toronto FC, one of the richest clubs in MLS. Maybe he's got visions one day of, going back to Europe into club football. This is a great stepping stone for that as well. We've seen that before. So I see why he did it 100%. I think it's not a great day for Canada soccer, obviously, but there are some names out there who I think are really intriguing.
The charms for Canada soccer, they have no money. At least that's what they say. How can they go out and get a mid level or even a top tier manager? Where are these funds going to come from?
Well, I mean, right now you have Mauro Biello, right? Who's John Herdman's right hand man with Canada. Assuming he stays with the national program, maybe he comes with him to the Toronto FC, which would really
Right.
upset CF Montreal fans. But he's a candidate really respected, knows the Canadian landscape really well, has coached at a high level before. He's there. Bobby Smirniotis was mentioned with the TFC job as well. Currently, he coaches in Hamilton Forge in the CPL. He's won, I think it's 3 trophies, 3 championships with Forge. I've known Bobby Simonitis for a very long time. He is a smart football man. He knows tactically, he's very, very astute. He's great at developing players as well, young players. He did it with Sigma before getting the Forge job. So there's just 2 names right now sitting out there who are very much on the radar of Canadian soccer. They can't afford a big name. Simple as that, right?
Right.
Can they afford a CPL manager? Well, you'd hope so, right? They're
Yeah.
already paying Maura Biella something, right? You're saving a lot of money. That's one thing I found quite interesting the more I thought about it. John Herdman makes good money, right? As I mentioned, as a national program, and so he should. This is a program that's broke right now. Um, Saving that salary and getting someone at, I don't know, half the cost, it does help a few areas that perhaps otherwise were being left alone, right? So that's one angle. Maybe Canada Soccer isn't too upset by this. Maybe this works out for everyone.
Could be. It'd be very interesting though if they somehow found the money to go out and get a big name. I'm on social media,
Explain that.
X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I can just keep seeing Carlo Ancelotti holding up a Canadian jersey every time I click
I
on
think
anything Canada
The
Soccer.
Brazil job's a bit more alluring to him than the
That
Canada
is,
job.
thank you. I'm happy that you said it. I also see people bringing up old quotes from John Herdman when he was denying rumors. Remember those New Zealand rumors? And he
Mhm.
said, to our Canadian players and our fans, I want to reiterate my commitment to Canada Soccer and growing the program. I'm not going anywhere. We still have a job to do, and the objective is to take the team to the next level in 2026. I'm not going to hold that against him because you know as well as anybody the disaster that is behind the scenes in terms of Canada Soccer. So listen, he says one thing, a new opportunity pops up. We're humans, and I think if a better opportunity does pop up, you got to take the job, right, Charms?
It's professional sport, right? There's no
Right.
loyalty in professional sport. He's done
Yeah.
his time. John Herdman has done his time in Canada, right? For the national program. What he did for the women's program, he turned that completely around. He's done it the same thing in the men. I think we look back on this era of John Herdman with Canada soccer as pivotal in the game's development in this country. One of the most important, if not the most important era in Canada's soccer history. If there was a real national stadium, he should be embossed in bronze outside at some point for what he's done to this program. So, listen, I'm sure he spoke to New Zealand. I hold nothing against him for doing that. That's his right. And who can blame him for jumping ship? Whether it's jumping ship, however you want to look at it, who can blame him? He's put his time in. He's earned the right to pick his path now. And when a job like TFC pops up, it's tough to say no to it.
And he's going back to BMO Field where he's had a ton of success in his managerial career. So maybe there's some luck there associated with TFC and John Herdman. It'll be interesting to see who takes over Canada. I think their next friendly is October 13th against Japan. Just the one friendly for Canada, unfortunately. But Charms, we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot more on Room 442 coming up in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Bill. We certainly will. Starting, I'm pretty sure we'll have a good chat on Wednesday. That's for sure.